A couple of years ago, when we were still busy planting churches in Cape Town, South Africa, I had the privilege to go with a group and visit Paulsmoor Maximum Security Prison in Cape Town. It's a prison with about 2,500 inmates, known to be extremely violent and dangerous, specifically because of gangs. The 26, the 27s, and the 28s, the number gangs. These are gangs that are brutal, that have no respect for life or for anything. And we went through this prison and we would stop at these little holes in the doors and speak to these prisoners and ask them if they wanted prayer. And that's like 30 people in a room, all just like squashed into this little tiny space. It is crazy. But as we spoke to them, I couldn't help but notice the tattoos on their arms that said 26, 27, or 28. It was one of those three gangs. And as we spoke to them, I realized that these numbers on them, these gangs that they are part of, that is where they find their identity in. But it is also where they find the protection in. Because if you're not part of one of those gangs, you are vulnerable. Right? You're on your own. But I also realized this is all they think they will ever be. And that left me with this question in my heart, is there a different option for them? Is this really all there will ever be is a number tattooed on their arm? Or is there more for them? And I realized back then already that we all carry our own versions of those numbers in our lives. Labels and names and opinions and expectations that other people have written on us. And some of them started when we were really small. Maybe it was a teacher that when you just started school told you, you are so smart. You're going to achieve great things. Or maybe it was a teacher who told you, you know what, you're just dumb. I don't even see how you will ever finish this grade or amount to anything in your life. Maybe it was a parent, a mom who always told you, you're such a happy child. I just appreciate that so much. Or a parent who told you, can you just stop being so shy and just get out of your own skin and speak to other people? Maybe it was a coach who told you, you're talented. You're going to achieve much in sports. Or it was a coach who told you you're useless and you will never achieve anything. Maybe it was a dad who told you you're deeply loved. Or a dad who deserted you and told you you're just a mistake. Maybe it was a mom that told you you're so beautiful. Or one who told you you're ugly. We all carry these labels with us. And maybe they are not inked on your skin, but still, those labels stuck to our hearts. And some of them stick for a lifetime. We all carry some of these labels with us that people put on us when we were tiny little human beings. And they're still with us. And over time, the problem is these labels start to shape how I view myself. It starts to shape my identity, who I believe I am, what my worth might be. But what if the words that are written all over your life, what if those are not the same words that God speaks over you? I think the challenge in life is that often the voices that are the loudest are the ones that we believe to be true. Even if it's a lie. Even if it says something that is not true about you, if it's the loudest voice, we tend to believe it. And that is why we started this series, Who Told You That? A series in which we are exposing some of the lies that we use to determine our value, that we use to determine our identity, that we use to find purpose in. And we're exposing those lies and we're replacing it for God's truth, what God says about you, what God made you for. And the first two lies that we've already looked at, if you weren't here for the first 2 weeks, you can catch up on YouTube or any podcasting platform. Just search for Grace Church. But we've already spoken about two lies. One, you are what you own. And we realized our stuff doesn't define us. The things we own, our possessions, doesn't define us. It doesn't determine our value. We spoke last week about you are what you do. And we learned that my achievements and my successes or my failures do not determine who I am, does not determine my value. And today's lie, the third lie that we're looking at, is you are what they say. And it's easy for us to immediately go and be like, I'm not that stupid. I don't just think I am whatever someone says I might be. But the reality is that over time, we get shaped by the people that speak things over our lives. And it starts when we are little. Maybe you aren't part of the 26, 27, or 28 gangs, but maybe you were part of a gang, like preschool, right? The gang with the tree house and no girls were allowed. Or in school, movies even uses this as illustrations and sometimes makes fun of it. How people group together and you have to fit into the group to be part of it. The musos or the skaters or the jocks or the athletes or the nerds or whatever that classification might be. And then you go to university and you're so thankful that I'm an alumni of this university and not that college. Or I'm so thankful that I was part of this sorority or that fraternity and not part of something else. And I always wonder, why do we have such an incredible need to be part of something like that? And I think the reason for it is because we were made by God to live in community. We are social creatures. We were made to live in community. But somewhere along the way, we started to confuse belonging with approval. And the two are very different things. You see, belonging says you are accepted, you are loved for who you are. While approval says you are accepted as long as you perform the way I want. As long as you say the things that I want to hear. As long as you agree with my opinions on life. And that is how we all fall for peer pressure. And if you're a teen, this is probably one of the hardest things you're going to deal with for the next couple of years. If you're an adult, you're not free of this. Peer pressure is defined as this. It is when you get encouraged to follow your peers, your colleagues, your neighbors, other kids at school, whatever it might be, when you follow your peers and change your attitudes, change your values or behaviors to conform to the group or to the individual. And while belonging can be good for us, approval seeking can be really bad for us. And I think there is nothing in this world that have highlighted our need for approval and the brokenness that comes with that more than social media, the rise of social media. Surveys show us that 45%, so almost half of people under the age of 30, fear losing their job or their reputation because of something they post online. And if you're a Gen Zer or you have kids in Gen Alpha, here's the interesting thing. Those two generations, 1 in 3 Gen Zers, 33%, 1 in 3, say they self-censor. They cannot fully be who they want to be. They have to self-censor because they are afraid of being canceled. Phobias are shifting. It is now for our young people, one of the biggest fears is to be canceled. And the same people who cancel others, the biggest fear is that I'm going to be canceled. So I cannot be myself, I cannot say what I want, and we created a world where we shape our identity and who we are according to the approval of others. We've shaped a world where one comment can make you and one post can break you. And the problem is the moment that something goes wrong and the approval stops, we start questioning our value. Jesus also had to deal with this. And for the last 2 weeks, and this will be our last week that we are in this text, we've been reading about a time when Jesus, just before he starts his public ministry, that he was in the wilderness. So before he starts his ministry, he goes into the wilderness to spend time with God. He fasts for 40 days. And during that time, the devil appears and starts tempting Jesus with 3 big temptations. And we've already covered the first 2 today. We are reading the third one from Luke 4, verse 9 to 13. If you've got your Bibles, you can open there, but it will also be on the screen for you. Verse 9, then the devil took him, that is Jesus, then the devil took Jesus to Jerusalem, to the highest point of the temple, and said, if you are the Son of God, jump off. Have you ever told your children, if everyone tells you jump off the cliff, will you jump? Peer pressure, right? This is where it started. The devil said, if you are the Son of God, jump off. For the scriptures say, he will order his angels to protect and guard you, and they will hold you up with their hands, so you won't even hurt your foot on a stone. But Jesus responded, the scriptures also say, you must not test the Lord your God. When the devil had finished tempting Jesus, he left him until the next opportunity came. The same as in all the lies that followed as the previous two temptations, the devil doesn't come to Jesus with an innocent question. Like, hey, will the angels protect you? It is an attack on the identity of Jesus. What does he say? If you are the Son of God. He says, if you are the Son of God, prove it to me so I can approve of you. Prove to me that God actually approves of you and will send his angels and will take care of you. But Jesus says no. And I think there's a couple of things we can learn from this that we can apply in our lives. You see, the first thing, the problem with this lie is the devil says, prove to me and then I'll approve to you. But in order to gain the devil's approval, Jesus would have had to disobey God. And at the end of the day, therefore, his own convictions, because his convictions came from the Father. And that is the trap when we live for the approval of people. The trap is that when you live for approval, you'll eventually will have to betray your own convictions. Until one day you look in the mirror and you realize you don't know yourself anymore. You realize you are not the person anymore that God has made you to be. And here is a challenge with this lie, is you cannot win the same as with the previous two. Because everyone that you encounter in life will have a different expectation of you. And even if you can meet the expectations of one group, tomorrow their expectations might shift. So it's a moving target. But even if you could meet all of their expectations, there might be another group in your life, and they are expecting something else. So it is constantly this moving target that we can never hit. You would either need to have like multiple split personalities where like the right one just pops out at the right time with the right people. But even then, like if I'm this way with these people and those people see me being that way, they will cancel me anyway. So either you have to have these multiple split personalities that just all show up at the right time, or you're going to disappoint someone. And the problem is when we disappoint people, we often feel socially downgraded. It feels like I'm affected personally deep in my soul, and my very identity gets destroyed. So to avoid it, we just seek acceptance even harder. So we try to be better. We try to be more. We compromise our convictions more in order to fit in. All to accept ourselves through others' approval of us. Trying to figure out who you are through the approval of others can cause you to never discover your true self. Because you will have to betray who God made you to be, and you will have to betray the convictions that He might have for your life. So perhaps then the answer is to completely avoid people altogether. Because if I avoid people, guess what? Then I avoid the issue of being rejected or accepted, right? And this is actually happening. It's playing out in front of our eyes. This game of trying to appease everyone and being so afraid that someone is going to cancel me, being so afraid that people are going to reject me, has led to a place where we are unable to find belonging and community in the 21st century. AI, and I'm not talking about just like Siri or whatever, but AI like generative AI, like what we have in ChatGPT and stuff like that. That went public where everyone started using it in 2022. By 2024, many people were using it, mostly for generating ideas. The thing that it was created to do. This here, the number one use for AI is therapy and companionship. Because I've been to talks about AI and people talk about plagiarism and stuff like that. And I'm like, you are missing the problem. We're talking about the surface level stuff. There is a much deeper problem that I am worried about. And that is the fact that people are building relationships with people-pleasing AI bots because they are too afraid to live in community. They are so afraid of being rejected. They're so afraid of not being accepted that they will rather go to a bot that will always approve of them, that will always say what they want to hear, and that is always available. And so human beings are trading true connection for convenience. And it leaves us lonelier than before. And that is not good for us. The answer is not avoiding people in order to avoid this whole situation of approval or disapproval. There has been many studies done on isolation, on being alone. Research by Nathan DeWall and Brad Bushman found this. They said people who feel isolated, lonely, and excluded. That includes people who've built friends on AI for themselves. They tend to have poor physical health. Like, look, what does people have to do with my physical health? It's about what I eat. It's about my exercise. Guys, we are not like these four little separate things. We are body, mind, soul, and spirit. That is our total being. And if one part of us is sick, the other parts will become sick as well. And not having people in your life leads to poor physical health. They don't sleep well. Their immune systems sputter. And they tend to die sooner than people who are surrounded by others who care about them. If you watch the Blue Zone stuff about centenarians, people who reach 100, they found the same thing. People who have community live longer. But it's not only your physical health. Being excluded is also associated with poor mental health, and they said, which creates a destructive loop, which at the end of the day, they say lead to suicide. So cutting people from your life altogether so that you are not canceled, so that you do not get their disapproval is not the answer. Why does it not work? Because it leaves us without one of the most significant purposes that we've been created for. And what does the Bible tell us about our purpose? Jesus said two things. Love God with every fiber of your being and love your neighbors as yourself. If you cut people, you're cutting this major part of what God created you to be just out of your life. When you go against the grain of your design, you're set up to fail. So the lie says, approval will give you acceptance. That's the lie. Approval will give you acceptance, but it only creates pressure. It creates pressure to perform. It creates pressure to conform and change constantly and giving up your convictions and to be good for this group and then match that group. It's just pressure that doesn't cease. So here's the real question that we should be asking. Because we cannot get away from the fact that we do need acceptance and approval. It's built into us. So the real question is, does it really matter that we're accepted by everyone? Or another way to say it is, what relationships do I require acceptance and approval from? See, the devil tested Jesus. He said, prove to me and I'll prove to you. And then Jesus just answers this way. Without proving anything, he's like, don't test God. Just that. You see, because Jesus knew that if he gained the devil's approval, he would have lost a super important relationship. The one that matters more than all. He would have lost the approval of God. Because he would have betrayed his Father in heaven. When you live for people's approval, there is a real risk in your life to missing God's presence in your life and missing God's purpose for your life. Jesus could answer it this way because he knew that of all the relationships that he could have, the relationship with his Father was the one that mattered the most. His approval mattered more than anyone else's approval. And I do not believe that as Christians, if you call yourself a Christian, I do not believe that we can fully follow Jesus if we still need the applause of everyone around us. Paul understood this. And he grappled with this tension, and he wrote about this in Galatians 1 verse 10. Hear what he says. It's a real tension. He's like, am I trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Am I trying to please people? Because if I'm still trying to please people, I will not be a servant of Christ. He's like, there is a tension that I'm living with. But I cannot be fully devoted to Jesus and still live for the applause of people. You cannot have both. You have to choose whose approval matters more to you. But it cannot be both equally. And because relationships so deeply affect how we view ourselves, because relationships have such an important role in shaping our identity and our self, the view that we have of ourselves and our value and our worth, we have to decide beforehand which relationships we're going to allow to do that. Otherwise, you're just going to allow each and every relationship in your life to determine who you are. You know why I think we struggle so much and why we have this constant need to prove ourselves to others? And I say this myself, for myself. I think we try to prove ourselves to others when we don't have the peace and the stability and the assurance and the rootedness that comes from truly being in Jesus. So what influencers do you pay attention to? What are the voices that speaks the loudest in your life? There is only one voice that will never change. And he has never changed. There is only one voice that will never require more of you or less of you than what you were created for. And that is God. Peace is not found in others' approval of you. True peace can only be found in God's acceptance of you. And you might think like, Louis, this is way too simple. It's not that simple, man. Like, you just said we were made to live in community. You just said we were made to be in relationship. So how does just God's approval override people's approval? It doesn't make sense. See, the reason why we believe that is because deep inside of us, we still believe a lie. We still believe the lie that we are what other people say about us. But who told you that that is who you are? Who told you that their opinion should determine your value and your worth and your identity? Perhaps it's the same one who tried to trick Jesus with it. Perhaps it's the devil that's still trying to convince you with a lie that you are what others say about you. But the gospel, the good news of Jesus, flips this lie on its head and tells us that we do not need to find acceptance through approval of other people. We can find acceptance in God's approval of us. And perhaps you're here today and you're like, on one of two sides. Maybe you're like, I'm so glad that I have God's approval because I'm such a good person. Or maybe you're on this side and you're like, Louis, you don't know how bad I am. I don't have God's approval. I cannot have it. It's impossible. Well, both of you are right and wrong at the same time. Because the gospel, the good news of Jesus, has this tension in it. On the one hand side, it tells us that on our own, we are not acceptable before God. Whether you want to know it or not, your life isn't perfect and it's not holy. We all have sin. We all have a past. We all have brokenness that we grapple with every single day. And the Bible tells us that God is holy. He's pure. He does not have sin. He does not have brokenness in him. And therefore, a holy God cannot be in the presence of broken, messy, messed up people. And we have to accept that as a fact. Otherwise, we will never turn to Jesus to find what he has to offer. And that's the other side of the equation. Through Jesus, God gives us His own approval. You see, Jesus fixed what we cannot fix. All of that messiness and brokenness and sin, there was a cost to erase it, to clean it up. And when Jesus came and He died on a cross, He paid the price because we couldn't on our own. And He paid that price so that we have a clean slate. So that when God looks at us, He doesn't see the mess. When God looks at us, He sees the beauty that He created. One of the verses that I love the most, that shares this so beautifully, is from Isaiah 1 verse 18. It says, "Come now, let's settle this." God is like, let's get this out of the way once and for all. One, though your sins are like scarlet. One, you are broken. You are messy. You're not holy. You're not perfect. Accept that. It's like, though your sins are like scarlet, guess what? You cannot do this. God says, I will make them as white as snow. Though they are red like crimson, bleeding, I will make them as white as wool. Because this is what God told us from the old prophets in the Old Testament to the price that Jesus paid on the cross, and the writers of the New Testament, is that His acceptance and approval of us is enough. And I want to make it clear to you today, because I think it's so hard to understand how God's acceptance of us override our need to gain the acceptance of other people. And I've used the illustration the past 2 weeks of just like how kids relate to their father. And I think that is so important for us, because when God speaks about us, He speaks about us as children. And when we speak to Him, He literally told us, call me Dad, Abba. That's the Hebrew word, Dad, Father. And I've got a soccer ball here, and I want you to think of a soccer match for a moment, maybe one that you played. And if it's soccer or not, it doesn't matter. My girl did cross country, same principle. I can remember when I played rugby and when I ran track and field, same principle. When a small kid is playing soccer, each time they score, they do not look towards the scoreboard. They look for the gaze of one person. When my girl was running, she didn't look at everyone who was ahead of her or behind her. She looked for us, for her mom and her dad. And what they look for is the smile. Is that from the parents that tells them, like, listen, no matter if you're winning or losing, no matter if you scored or not, we love you. We accept you. We approve of you. And when they see that smile, it doesn't matter how the game is going. They play with passion and they play with freedom. But when they look at their dad and they realize that his smile is dependent on their performance, when they realize that he will only smile if they fit into his plan, or when they can somehow gain his approval, when they realize his approval is dependent on their performance, the game becomes pressure. See, that's what the gospel changes. You are not playing for God's approval. You're playing from it. And God's smile over you does not depend on the score. Does not depend on what people say about you. God's smile over you depends on one thing, on your surrender to Jesus. The beauty is when you know that you already have your Father's approval, you don't need the approval of everyone else around you. You don't constantly need to win the game. That's when you gain the peace. That's when you gain the stability, the assurance, that rootedness that is bigger than the approval that you need from people. That is the moment that you can start ripping off all of these labels that people have placed on your life since you were little. That is the moment where you realize, I am not people's approval of me. Their approval, what they said about me, doesn't matter, because ultimately the one that matters is the one who created me for purpose and with purpose. And His approval of me is the only approval that truly matters. Jesus could answer the way He did without proving anything, because He knew that He already had the approval of His Father. He didn't need more. You are not what they say. You are what God says about you. So I want you to think deeply today. Whose approval are you still chasing? And what is that costing you? Because there's a cost to it. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take a moment that we're going to respond, and we're going to turn the lights off, and I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. And what I want you to do is, for a couple of seconds, to go back to all of those labels. To think about all of those things people have said about you that shaped your identity, that shaped your sense of self-worth. And choose to surrender it to God. And then, while our eyes are closed, I'm going to read to you God's truth, what He says about you. So let's just close our eyes and take a moment to reflect. What lies are you still believing about yourself because people placed labels on your life? Here's what God says about you. God says you're no accident. You were put together with purpose, and you were made perfectly. Psalm 139 verse 13. You, God, created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Not only are you made that way, but you are loved more deeply than you can imagine. Jeremiah 31 verse 3. I have loved you, says God. I have loved you with an everlasting love. A love that has no beginning and no end. I have drawn you with unfailing kindness. I'm like, but how can you care about me? I'm one of billions. It says, I know your name, and I call you by your name. Isaiah 43:1. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you, and I have called you by name. You are mine. And nothing you do can ever make Him push you away from Himself. John 6:37, whoever comes to me, I will never drive away. And not only did God accept you, but He's passionate about you. Luke 12:6. What is the price of 5 sparrows? 2 copper coins? Yet God does not forget a single one of them. Not a single sparrow. And the very hairs on your head are all numbered. God wrote a number on each and every hair. So don't be afraid. You are more valuable to God than a whole flock of sparrows. Not only is He passionate about you, but He gives you a new identity. John 1:12. Yet you all who did receive Him, to those who believed in His name, He gave the right to become children of God. That means you carry God's family name. That means you carry the status and the honor that comes with His family name. And not only did He adopt you, but He became your Father. He says in Romans 8:15, you received God's Spirit when He adopted you as His own children. Now we can call Him Abba, Father. There is nothing in the world, no powers, no forces, no people that can ever pull you away from His love. In Romans 8:38 it says, nothing can ever separate us from God's love. Not death, nor life, neither angels nor demons. Indeed, nothing in all creation will ever be able to separate you from the love God has for you. And this is not time-bound. It says in Philippians 1:6 that He who began that good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus, until Jesus returns.